And good morning, Hoosier Nation, and welcome to another annoyed, aggravated, fill in the adjective edition of Hoosier Morning After. This is Hoosier Morning After Nebraska. Late last night, your Indiana Hoosiers go on to fall apart against Nebraska to a degree. We'll get into it. 86-70 to go 10-4 on the season. Drop their first Big Ten game of the season to go 2-1. Was an interesting one. It was good news coming in. Obviously, IU closest to full strength than we've been in a long time. Ware back off his sickness. X finally back after about a couple weeks, 7 weeks or so, I believe, of absence with his ankle injury. And had us excited going into it, but obviously needed to be tempered in those expectations, him being gone for so long. And we knew we'd see abbreviated minutes from him, and we'll get into depth a little bit more from him. And just kind of the story of this game, obviously, was the turnovers. Turnovers just kind of unforced to a degree, only by Indiana's own hand. But despite that, in the first half, IU would go only down by 8, taking it into halftime. I myself felt a little bit better about that. Obviously, the eye test, if you didn't even look at the score, would think that IU was down a lot more going into half. And you think that they could clean it up and come back out of half and do okay in this game. But we would be wrong there. Despite some better three-point shooting in the second half, the turnovers continued. And every time IU would crawl back even closer, Nebraska would tear down IU's defense and be able to make it on the other end. A perfect play for me that really kind of summed up that with the game was a point where Nebraska had a long rebound. IU was scrambling for it. Tobanaka on Nebraska got the long rebound about 5 feet or so from the three-point line. Malik was on him at that point, and for whatever reason, Malik turned his back to the ball handler and the person with the ball to try to find his man, even though he was on the ball, to which Tobanaka's own shock stepped a couple dribbles up and nailed a three-pointer. So very much kind of reminiscent of what happened in the rest of the game, and everything kind of fell apart despite Ware doing pretty well, despite some decent three-point shooting. It was just kind of story of turnovers that reared its ugly head, and IU set a season record in that standpoint. We'll get to that when we get to some of the stats in this game. Thank you for being with us. I'm your host, Chad Schwartzkopf. Here with me always is Martha, the mop lady. Martha, give me those opening thoughts.
Yeah, disappointing effort, right? I mean, I think obviously a lot of hope surrounded around what this first game in the new year could look like. You're sitting at 2-0 in the conference, and obviously there's a lot of question marks going into this one. I think the one bright spot was knowing that we were going to be at least as healthy as we've been in some time, with getting X back and getting Khalil back after his COVID illness. So, coming in kind of at full strength, but knowing that X obviously was going to have some rust, and Nebraska is an opponent that obviously that they returned a lot from last year and finished last year on a really, really high note. When you look at their schedule, they got kind of trounced by Creighton at home, but that's really their big only flaw with 2 losses. So you knew it was going to be a tough one. In fact, Indiana went in as 5-point dogs, but it was also a game that you're like, okay, this is one that if we come out and play like we can, it's one that we should be in there at the end and have a chance to get, a second Big Ten road win. And to go out there and lose by 16 is not only deflating, but it's kind of a microcosm on the concerns of not only what's led up to this point, but also where this season is headed. And you can't help, and Jennifer said it in the chat, you can't help but be negative after last night's game, especially with, I thought Woody's comments were extremely disheartening, putting all of the blame on the perimeter guys, and I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit, but, there's a reason we're in this position. The team is built a certain way, and it's certainly not built to run through a strong set of perimeter players or ones that have proven to be reliable at that position. So, I'm kind of left scratching my head at those comments. Like, this is a team you built, right? It's there's some accountability's got to start there with the head coach. And, this team is built in a funky way, and one that, for things to go right, you're going to have to play through your bigs. And when defenses adjust, we'll get into stats, but we actually hit 3-pointers last night. But why didn't it become a vocal point of the offense? We're shooting 50%. We lost by 16. Why aren't we, where are the adjustments? And so just a real frustrating game. You're putting yourself into position now where there's going to be zero room for mistake at home. So it's just a real head scratcher, especially with Woody's comments, and not sure really where we kind of go from here, but hey, let's get into it. Right.
Yeah. And you make a good point there. Woody's comments, while I haven't watched the post-game conference by him, I did read all those quotes by the reporters that were there at it. And like you said, it's a head scratcher that he's kind of gotten to that point where he's calling guys out in this way. He's been one that hasn't minced words at all when talking in these press conferences, and will say what needs to be said, but there's an air of desperation and just it doesn't sound right coming from it. These guys need some more confidence boost or whatever to get through this, and it's like you said, it's a season that the Big Ten is always hold court at home and steal a few away games, and holding court at home is like you said, very important in this season. Moving forward, IU has to take care of home court. And I think this is a team, while they lack that get up and go a lot in these games, and that was a lot of the intensity that we didn't see in this, that is the one thing that I think home affords a team is that extra juice. And they need that. They need what we give them in Assembly Hall. It was great to see, obviously, X back. Great to see him in the game. And there were a lot of moments in this game at the beginning where I think IU played some good offense, and X was able to kind of dribble and penetrate. And we really saw what IU was missing, having that elite point guard, having a guard that is a threat to other teams. He had a really great play at one point where he was in a little screen game with Anthony Walker, and Nebraska had to honor Xavier Johnson for his drive and stop him from driving and his shot and everything. And that little threat that he has allowed Walker to dive to the basket, and X, being a good passer that he is, found the hole, got it to him in an easy basket, and shows how easy that can be for this team if we have that person in that guard position that can do that and be that kind of threat. Obviously something that IU has lacked. Your thoughts on getting X back and just what he can be? Obviously we need to temper that because he's been missing for a while.
Yeah, I think obviously with the way we've kind of struggled on the perimeter, it's good to get a guy with his experience back, right? Do I think he's the answer? No, I think, even when we lost him, he wasn't, he was, it almost felt like he was still battling back. I mean, he missed 3/4 of last season, right? So he was, just kind of getting into a point where, he was used to playing, live action and stuff. So, to miss him for a chunk of time and now to have him back again, it's like, okay, well now, there's going to be, just like you said, there's going to be that ramp up stage. And you hope by the time we get to the heart of the Big Ten season, which is right around the corner, that he's in a position where, he's on the court a lot, can contribute. I always reference back to the first season we had X. By the time we got to the Big Ten tournament, he, along with Trace, put this team on their backs, right? He was a large part of that. And unfortunately, we lost him pretty early in the season last year, but we know what he's capable of. And it's a massive opportunity area for this team. But we've just got to get him, to a point where he can contribute and be on the floor. What he play 14 minutes? We've got to crank that up considerably. And I know that's not going to happen overnight, but when you look at the way this team is struggling on the perimeter, it's just, you wish you could have brought him back for some of those holiday games and get him some action there. But yeah, it's great to have him back, a guy with a ton of experience. I obviously not a massive impact on the box score, so you kind of temper it there. Unfortunately, he couldn't contribute from a point standpoint a whole lot last night, but his presence, his experience alone, I'm hopeful is a difference maker, and especially as we get into we've got Ohio State on Saturday, and Purdue's right around the corner. So it's a situation where we've got to get him up to speed quickly. We're going to need his leadership and experience. So last night was certainly a start.
Physically, at least, it was promising. I noticed he was moving pretty well. I didn't really notice. To me, it didn't seem like he anything was bothering him. You didn't see him really shaking anything off. Laterally, he was moving pretty good. Again, not up to where he can be and where he will be, but at least like his movement laterally so far. He didn't look like he was holding back physically all that much. So I'm excited to see that. And again, I think an example of how we're struggling at that position is Anthony Leal in this game went in a lot earlier than we've seen him. I mean, this was a guy that had slim to no minutes last year. And suddenly, while he is becoming a decent enough bright spot for IU, did hit a three that he had that was open and was very engaged on defense. But there is a part of the issue. And again, I mean, no disrespect to Leal at all for saying this, but for IU to be successful and where we want IU to be, Leal should not be seeing the floor. The talent at the guard position should be higher to the point where he just doesn't get the minutes that he's getting. And again, I think the minutes that he's supplying for IU have been great. I think his calming factor and what he is giving to IU on the defensive side has been great. He's definitely done what he needs to do when he gets those minutes and has been that workhorse getting in. But I think it's just a microcosm to a degree of how we're struggling on the outside for this team. Your kind of thoughts on Leal?
Well, I think a guy like Anthony Leal, to have to rely on him the way we have to rely on him is the bigger concern. I think if you've got guards on your team that are offensive threats, then there's a place for an Anthony Leal. You look at a team like Illinois and Luke Goody. There's some programs around that have guys in that mold that can insert them into lineups at certain points because they're surrounded by good perimeter players. They're not having to rely on them as an answer, right? They're a nice add-on option to have, a perimeter threat, 3-point threat, right? But we're bringing him in because we have to, and this is where it goes back. This is where it goes back to the coaching staff, in my opinion, right? You want to sit there and point fingers at your perimeter players. Well, let's look at the way the roster is constructed. You're relying on Xavier Johnson, who's a guy, a fifth-year senior who's not proven to be able to play an entire season through since he's been here. That's your lead guard. You've got Gabe Cupps, who's, as raw as can be. Obviously, he's a very skilled point guard, but he's also a freshman that you're asking to put, into a Big Ten season, put through a Big Ten season. That's not going to happen in year one. And then you've got two guys who have not taken a step, who really didn't show signs of being able to take a step last year, Caleb Banks and CJ Gunn. Nothing, in my opinion, even gave any indication that these guys were going to be ready to be, solid contributors, unless some magic happened in the offseason. Has that happened before? Sure. But any opportunity they got last year, and they didn't get many, they didn't really show they were going to be anywhere near ready. And then you've got Trey Galloway, a 3 you're asking to play a 2. You've got Mackenzie Mbako, a 4 you're asking to play a 3. And you're trying to play old school basketball with 2 bigs. And then you're wondering why your perimeter guys are struggling. Well, because half of them aren't perimeter guys. You're asking guys to do things outside of their skill set. This team is built on the perimeter in a sport where guards carry you to the postseason, and we don't have them. And there's really no excuse for it. because this program has the ability to go out and get those type of players in this era of NIL transfer portal basketball. There's no reason not to construct your team with, unless you honestly thought that the guys you had were going to be able to carry you through a Big Ten season. And I don't know. I don't know how you see that or how you look at this roster. And it's built a lot on hope. And Indiana basketball should not be built on hope. You should go out and get some players that can fill that role, because obviously you could do that on the front court, right? You're adding Mackenzie and Bachman. I don't know if you made promises to him to say, hey, you're a 3, you're going to play on the perimeter, but I think he makes a better forward, and that just creates a whole nother problem where, you've got two you got a 5 and a 4. So it's just a very, very dysfunctional roster that's making you play a very dysfunctional brand of basketball. And right now it's, how do you fix it? So you asked me about Anthony Leal, and I just went off on some sort of tangent. So
No,
I apologize,
tangent,
but
no.
there's a reason that, there's a reason that Anthony's, I hate to pile on him any, but because there's a role for him in a really good offense. And I think he's coming in and doing the absolute best he can. But the fact that we have to lean on him as one of our top guards, that's the bigger concern. And that's on this coaching staff.
Yeah, it is. And I think the way you mention all the different players that are playing out of position, and Malik playing, Mbako playing the 3 when he should be a 4. The issue with playing him at the 4 is then you've got to play 3 guards. And that's scary to think of 3 guards that we have out there at one point. Now, we did do that at some points in this game where you saw that kind of situation out there for IU, but that then led to a lineup where you had Cups, Trey Galloway, and Anthony Leal, and there's just no scoring threat on the perimeter in that sort of lineup. And so I think that's one reason why the hand is being dealt the way it is, and McKenzie's playing where he is. Again, with a little bit better guard play and at least 1 or 2 guys that are scoring threats from the guard position, then I think you can play Trey at the 3 and allow McKenzie to play the 4 and get a true 4 out, and then Malik underneath, or Ware even underneath, just to be able to lob it to, would be ideal for IU and everything. And unfortunately, this is not how this team is constructed. And for me, I've got to see a lot of effort in the offseason. This coaching staff obviously has a lot to do in the offseason coming up. And we're still a long way away from that. And we're going to have to talk about rough guard play for quite a while now, guys. And it's going to be tough. It's going to be up and down, but this is the hand that we're dealt. And to round out kind of talking about the guards, at least for right now, I would say Trey kind of struggled in this game. He did hit some 3s towards the end of the game, which was good to see and kind of padded his stats. But he ended with 10 points, 4 for 10 from the field, 2 for 6 from 3. So it's good to see at least him get a little bit more volume of 3s. And that's, we'll get into that a little bit more, the 3-point shooting for this team. But a little too late. I think he needs to have more confidence. And he's another one that, unless the ball is going to him for sure, and he's going to be dribbling, he's not looking on the offensive side to score. He's not ready to catch and shoot. The movement off the ball has been weird overall, but I think from him as well. And again, I in an ideal world, in an ideal roster, he's the one coming first off the bench for IU. But your thoughts on Trey's game?
Yeah, a continued struggle. It's almost like, when you watch, it's almost like the pressure might be being felt a little bit. Especially when you look at the turnovers, right? I think obviously three is not a ton of turnovers, but when you put them on top of 19, you got 19 total turnovers, and when you look at what our starting 5 contributed to that, it's a pretty big problem. And when Trey Galloway is being leaned on to be your 2 guard, there's got to be a net positive contribution. I mean, he's playing 31 minutes a game and giving us 10 points. It's not. It's Trey. I mean, it's Trey, right? I mean, you said it. He's kind of built to be that spark plug, certainly has the ability, like he did against Kansas, to pop up for 25 plus points, but not necessarily a guy that can do that consistently. We know Trey at his best, and we saw it last year when he was that spark plug off the bench, and are there situations where he can be a spot starter? Sure. I mean, he's got that type of experience and skill set, but when you're relying on him to be a leader, when you're relying on him to be your two guard, and mold some of these freshmen, that's a lot to ask. And I thought, and I like what Nick said. You've got to give Nebraska credit. I mean, they're a team that I had kind of circled. If you look at the way they finished last year, and I don't think they lost anybody from last year's team. If they did, it was one guy. But if you look at I think they've done a really nice job of building their team through the transfer portal. They've found guys that have had success at other spots and brought them in. And he certainly had some challenges with turnover early on. And, you look at their schedule, they're going to be kind of a fringe tournament team just because, they don't have any great wins yet either. They're very, very similar to Indiana in a similar spot, but they're also a team that's dangerous because they've returned so many guys. And I think they're pretty decently coached. They played really good defense last night, and they took a lot of our guys out of the game, and they knew what our game plan was going to be. They knew what our strong suits were, and kind of forced our perimeter guys to be in a good spot. And the fact of the matter was we hit 50% of our threes. We just didn't shoot enough. So the game plan didn't adjust to how they played against us. And again, it just goes back to Trey being asked to do a lot of different things that are probably a little bit out of his skill set. So really not a ton of surprise.
Yeah, one bright side I will say in this game, obviously Ware was coming off being sick, and that's tough to do. You tend to be a little bit more gassed. Your body is still recovering and everything. Who knows exactly what date he finally broke whatever fever or anything he might have been feeling in this game. And you definitely saw that. You definitely saw him gassed towards the end, and he was putting all the effort he could into this. But he finished fairly well for this IU team, scoring 20 and finishing 9 for 12. Took 1 3, didn't make it. 10 rebounds was good to see. 2 blocks, 2 steals. Liked the effort that he had. He kind of had a feast underneath and should have, because he was considerably larger. IU took advantage of that from Malik and a couple other guys just kind of throwing it towards the basket, and he was just in position to just drop it right in the basket there. So high percentage chance for him, but good effort to see him pushing that motor. Obviously probably not feeling all that well and really tired and worn out. So obviously, hopefully he rests in these next 2 days, turning around for Saturday. But for the most part, liked what Ware gave us in this game. Your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I think you've got to find a way to get him. I think you've got to find a way to get him more shots. I think only getting 9 shots off is a bit of a concern, especially when he's, fresh off his illness. So no, he got 12 shots. I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry about that. So 12. Yeah, I mean, I think all things considered, fresh off his illness, to be able to contribute 34 minutes, 20 points. I think you've got to be pleased there. But you look at the combined turnovers between him and Malik, that's 8 turnovers, and you throw Trey in there, that's 12 of your 19 turnovers came from that group right there. So we've got to take care of the basketball, value the basketball. That's the one struggle. But I thought overall Khalil, especially coming off being sick, was a solid contributor. I wasn't sure how, because I can wear you out a little bit. I don't know how bad he had it, but to be able to come off, being sick and be able to play, the entire game except 6 minutes I think that's a pretty big deal. So it was nice to see, but again, I think just when being able to adjust, I think is the biggest thing. I think, they knew that we were going to play through Khalil and Malik, and I think we were able to a little bit, but, and I'm sure we'll get into Malik next, but only getting 34 points from those guys, I think, is a little bit low, especially with what Malik contributed last week. So overall, I thought Khalil did well, all things considered. Put us in a good spot. I go back to our adjustments or lack thereof. It's kind of a frustration point.
Well, and Malik, like you lobbed the transition. Malik Renew finished with 14 points, 4 for 9 from the field, hitting threes again, proving that he's a multi-level scorer, 2 for 3, 4 for 4 from the free throw line. Again, 6 rebounds, 5 assists. Those 4 turnovers is kind of the one blemish on his stats. The one disappointment is in the plus and minus. He's one of only 2 players, and I think the other one's kind of a flawed plus minus, but the only one on the positive side in plus minus at +1. Obviously, not much, but really kind of aggravating. And this is another realm that I'm going to harp on the coaching staff about. He sat for a lot of the game because of foul trouble. He's been pretty good containing his fouls, being a lot better with those fouls, but sat early in the first half, only ended up playing 11 minutes in the first half because he was in foul trouble, and then sat a good deal in the second half as well because of that threat, I believe, of foul trouble. And what did that net for IU? How many more fouls did Malik get after those 2 fouls? 0 fouls. So that's a frustration for me. And I know it's a way to play conservative and everything like that. From a coaching standpoint, that's just too conservative. He's IU's best player, and you have to take that risk, because if you're automatically fouling him out at that point, sitting with two fouls and not allowing him to get even closer to that other situation. I get it. You think that in the first half, when the game was still relatively in hand and a single digit deficit, that you want to save him and weather it and get into the second half and everything. But we need to look at the tape, and the coaching staff needs to realize we just need to let him foul out because he's just way too important to not have on the court. Your thoughts?
Yeah, agree. The stubbornness of the 2 fouls and sitting, especially in a game where, it's one that I think it's a game that we should expect to go in and compete and escape with a win. And 2, it just puts yourself in a team that's already a bit handicapped with the way it's constructed at a real disadvantage. You've got to have some trust in your guys to go out and be able to battle through that. So that's a struggle. You're taking one of your best players off the court, and it's not a first time thing, right? It's something that we've seen from Mike Woodson. I don't know if it's something that was a habit of his in the NBA, but player automatically gets 2 fouls and they sit the rest of the first half. Well, I don't think we've got a lineup good enough that can sustain that type of game plan, right? We just can't sustain our best players being on the bench for any given period of time, especially in that environment in this conference when we need every single win we can get. So yeah, just a struggle. And I think he adjusted a little bit last night, but still it's such a quick trigger that anytime somebody gets 2 fouls, they're right to the bench, right? You've got to just ask them to adjust and maybe play a different way. But from an offensive standpoint, you can't continue to take your best players off the floor, especially you don't have an answer on your bench to bring in and be able to contribute. So yeah, another kind of point of frustration for sure.
And McKenzie was another one that fell victim to that benching as well. Finished with only 3 fouls at the end of the game. 6 points for him, 2 for 8. Just wasn't knocking him down. 2 for 4 from the 3-point line, but didn't really feel like his defense was the reason. I thought his defense was a lot better. And again, overall, I will say the defense, they did adjust a little bit. We didn't see the overhelping that we've seen. Obviously, IU struggled otherwise with some of the ball screen action, but at least the overhelping wasn't the detriment to allow Nebraska to get all the shots that they wanted. But McKenzie is another one that I think is a hot hand, and IU needs to run some more things for him and could have been that spark plug on offense. But again, sat because of a lot of just careless foul management by the coaching staff. Your thought on McKenzie's game?
Yeah, I just think back to I know. I think back to Kennesaw State when he came out and, knocked down three threes in the matter of a couple minutes, and then ended up playing 14 minutes. And you look at the box from last night and 20 minutes, and maybe not that contribution offensively, and just from a consistency standpoint, I think his defense has gotten a little bit better, but we're still giving up 86 points in Nebraska. We gave up 80 some points against Kennesaw State. I don't think the defense is near good enough, especially when you look at our length. I really thought coming into this season, our defense had the ability to carry us just because of our length and disruption ability alone. But when you look at our defensive scheme and that, I almost call it pack line, but it's still that backside sag, nail, rim slot, whatever you want to call it, where our guys are left to, especially against teams like Kennesaw State and Nebraska, who are known 3-point shooting teams. Your defense continues to be at a disadvantage just by the style of defense you play. And it almost creates guys that are a little bit lackadaisical because they're sagging back on the backside, and then when the rotation comes, I don't know if we're not quick enough or we're just too slow to react. And that's not all on McKenzie. You see it across the board, and we just again, it goes back to what I feel at times is just a real lack of adjustment made. It almost feels like a real stubbornness. Like this is our scheme. We're going to run with it and ride with it and just hope to get better at it. And there's not been any of that progress. I think overall McKenzie, I think just to get 20 points, or excuse me, 20 minutes and 6 points, it's okay. It's fair. But I think you want that number to be up specifically in the points area.
Yeah. On a team that's kind of lacking on where the scoring is going to come from at some points, and a game where different lineups, you kind of saw that and you're like, okay, well, who scores here? Who's going to take it here? You need McKenzie in because you know that he's at least a go-to at some point. They can run something. He can even maybe create for himself. Finishing up, kind of talking about just the rest of the bench overall. Gabe, Anthony, Walker, that is, Caleb Banks, and CJ. Very lackluster contributions from there. While I will say, to that point, Gabe was looking for his own shot a little bit more. He did have that very long 2. He just needs to get a little bit farther out and ended up with 5 points. Anthony Walker struggled a little bit in this game with 8 points. The one thing that I will say positive about what he did was that IU lacked the rest of the team was he was aggressive and got to the line, going for 8 free throws, making 6 of them. So he made a little bit higher than he normally does. So it was good at least to see him get aggressive. And obviously, if I look at it, the rest of the guards, not a single other guard for IU got to the line or shot a free throw. And that's an issue as well. That shows how the lack of aggression that we had on the guard spot to try to get downhill and get them into trouble. Because that's what we have hung our hat on a good deal was we are the highest, as you heard in the broadcast. We take the most amount of threes in the Big Ten. I think we were second or third, they said, possibly. And but we're the lowest, 13th in free throw percentage. So that's not great kind of situation. And again, Caleb Banks came in kind of 10 minutes, looked a little lost, was a little frustrated because I think the 2 fouls that he did get, he fouled twice on 3-point shooters, just out of rotation or lacking discipline in that sense. CJ again struggled to find, at least he didn't make a 3-point shot. Maybe if he went in a little bit earlier, he might have been a spark plug for IU. But your general thoughts on the rest of those IU players?
Yeah, when Anthony Walker is shooting half of your free throws, when he's shooting as many as Malik and Khalil combined, there's that certainly raises questions, right? On I think naturally you look at the way the game's called a little bit, but from an aggression standpoint and trying to draw a foul standpoint, and he went 6 for 8 from the line, and we went 13 for 19 as a team. So again, and he only played 17 minutes. So for him to come in and obviously they were calling some fouls, but for him to come in and have that type of contribution from the line in those limited minutes, it makes you ask, okay, why not one of our guards shot a free throw? So that speaks to you look at Trey, McKenzie, Xavier, and Gabe combined, 0 free throw attempts. So again, goes back to kind of the game plan, lack of adjustments, and I listened to the assembly call show. And by the way, very good job on the Crimson Cast After Dark show, Chad. That was tremendous, making your evening debut. I loved it. But listen to the assembly call show a little bit, and they were talking about just our guards being very unprepared outside of McKenzie and Baco to even be ready to get their shots off on the perimeter, because they're so used to working the ball down low, and they catch the ball flat-footed and they're not ready to shoot. And especially when we're trailing in a game, when we're shooting 50% from three, why aren't we looking to get these guys more involved? And we go back to last year and the lack of running any sort of sets for Miller Kopp, and it's just goes back to kind of that stubbornness and okay, let's shift our game plan a little bit. And when you look at the bench and the contributions or lack thereof, Caleb and CJ aren't giving us a whole lot. We're forced to rely on Anthony. Gabe's now back in a position where he can contribute on the bench, and he played 26 minutes. And I thought he did, I thought he did what you need a freshman point guard to do, and came in, he played 26 minutes and contributed in a decent way. So, and Anthony, I think, has become probably our top option off the bench. So, outside of that, it's you're in a position now where you've got a lot of inconsistencies on guys you were hoping to take that next step. So, just kind of a frustrating night overall. And I think you include some of those guys that came off the bench into that comment as well.
Well, and Gabe Kupp's minutes, as you said, a little bit limited from what he's had recently. And I think we'll see very quickly as Xavier Johnson gets back up to speed, the minutes flip-flop between him and Xavier Johnson. You'll see Xavier closer to the 20, 26, 30 minutes, and then you'll see Gabe more on the 15 realm. And that'll be great for him. That'll allow him to have better contributing minutes and see the game and be one of those players again. And I've said it so many times, sorry to be the broken record, but those high basketball IQ players can serve you very well sitting on the bench to start a game and really kind of seeing the game and seeing what's happening, and then come off the bench and contribute, find those holes, do what they need to do. So that's one thing that's gonna definitely go up once Xavier Johnson gets back up to speed. And I think, again, the other thing that we'll hopefully see, I'm very hopeful for, is Trey Galloway get going a little bit more with Xavier Johnson back, just feeling that relief of responsibility, because obviously a lot of the responsibility on the guard position has been on him, even though Gabe, yes, has been the ball handler for the most part when X has been out. There's definitely been some more responsibilities on the shoulders of Trey Galloway. So I look for that to kind of find some level and a little bit of hope, at least on my end, moving forward for this team. And from that standpoint on the guard position, getting into the nitty gritty and the not so fun things to talk about, a lot of the stats in this game. Obviously, the big one rearing its ugly head. IU set a record for the season. Not a good one, for 19 turnovers, which led to Nebraska was able to capitalize on and got 27 points. Again, right there, you just look at that stat. That's the game for you. That'll do it for you. Beyond IU's lack of defense and other struggles offensively, that was the main struggle. IU dribbling into coverages, getting stuck, the guys underneath, knowing you got to know that double team is coming, and guys moving for them and finding other situations. Cross court passes that were obviously telegraphed and know that was going to happen led to some turnovers. So a few forced by Nebraska, and I'm not going to take anything away from them. They played some hard-nosed defense at home. You're going to have that juice. You're going to do that. But a good amount of them as well, unforced turnovers, and they capitalized on that. Had IU cleaned that up and brought that down to half and done a little bit better. Nebraska wouldn't have gotten those extra points, gotten a little bit more rhythm, because once you turn a team over, you get going on the other end, you're able to find some rhythm offensively. You're able to get an opponent struggling to get back and get into position defensively. So that was the main, obviously, ugly stat for IU. Some good things to look at, obviously, is the shooting. Again, overall, not terrible for IU. 47% from the field, 50% from three, 9 for 18. A decently high volume for IU. Obviously, you want to see a little bit better. If we're starting to shoot it a little bit better, let's take a few more. Any other stats that you're looking at in this game, or ones that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I think, well, obviously you hit the nail on the head with the turnovers, right? That's just a real lack of, you're not going to win on the road in a conference game in an environment like that with 19 turnovers. And you look at the points they scored off of turnovers and the points we didn't score off turnovers. I think the other thing that sticks out is our real lack of, so you're not going to really see it in a stat line, but our fast break offense is awful. We really struggle at finishing at the rim, and
we got one fast break point, which I don't know how you can get one fast break point. A fast break free throw, I guess.
Yeah, maybe they call it a foul, but just our inability to finish fast break on fast breaks is just, it's mind blowing. And so, and I think part of that's points off turnovers too. You can combine, what they did, what we didn't, but the turnovers put them, I think, in a position to take control of the game. And then obviously you look at, we talked about the free throws, right? Anthony Walker taking half our free throws, big problem. Not adjusting our game plan at all when we're hitting 50% of our threes to get guys looks from the perimeter to try to give us a chance to get back into the game. So I think a lot of the stats kind of prove to the reason we struggled. And, it's hopefully, I think, we get into Ohio State, we see a little bit more offensive contribution from Xavier. I think, you just look at the box score and I think it was 14 points from Malik is a little unusual. I think he's been averaging closer to 20. So hopefully being back in Assembly Hall, I think the students will be back. I think we're starting to figure out, we had some hope, and I don't want to say the hope is gone, right? There's a lot of season left, but when you look at this team is going to take its lumps on the road, I think it's just built that way. And, does that mean we can't have a successful season and battle to get in the tournament? No. Mike Woodson's proven that he can get teams to play, kind of when people start to doubt him a little bit, he's proven to kind of get teams to play well. So my hope is we see that and maybe surprise us a little bit, but a lot of more questions than answers right now.
Yeah, that's definitely been the theme of this year, is the question mark. This is the question mark season. So many questions going into the season. A few have gotten answered. A few have been answered and then re-asked. But again, like you said, it's a missed opportunity. There's not going to be many opportunities to get road wins in the Big Ten. This was definitely one that we could have won, and we had probably the best chance of many of them looking down the schedule to get. But we'll have to keep fighting. The lucky point, the good side that I see is, again, that IU comes back and plays at home after this. So to come back home is exactly what this team needs to get a little bit of juice and everything going. Again, that game against Ohio State is Saturday at 8 p.m. Another late-ish game, not as bad. It's going to be an FS1, I believe, for you to watch. But let's wrap this one up. Just go ahead and we'll finally pull off the last little bit of that Band-Aid. Give me your final closing thoughts on this.
Yeah, I mean, really all you can do is move on, right? This team is built the way it's built. There's a lot of work to be done if you want to put yourself in a position to make the tournament. I mean, holding court at home is one thing, but when you also look at what Indiana hasn't done in tier 1 and tier 2 games, there's very, very little room for error. And you need every tier 1 and tier 2 win you can get to even put yourself in a conversation to be up for an NCAA bid. And that leads you to the question that we're in year 3. And, I struggle to understand why Indiana is in this situation. There's a lot of talent on this basketball team. I just think it's dysfunctional talent. It's built in a way that I don't think is conducive to productive basketball in this era of college basketball. I think, and to me, that goes right back to Mike Woodson. And maybe I'm being a little bit negative just because last night's game is fresh in my mind. But last night wasn't really an outlier for the way this team has performed. We've had to scratch and claw at home. We took Kansas down to the wire. And if we get that win, I think we're probably sitting in a little bit different spot today. But when you look at what we haven't done against opportunistic opponents, and I say that referring to, playing Auburn on a neutral court, going out to Madison Square Garden and playing UConn and getting Kansas. I mean, we weren't even close on neutral courts, and we lost against Kansas. And, now we're in a position where, what do we have to fall back on, or what's our identity, and where do we go from here? And now we're just hoping to kind of hold serve. Our last option is we really need to hold serve at home, right? And that's just to put ourselves in the conversation. So it's frustrating in year 3, especially when you look at, I don't, in an effort not to sound like a boomer or an old man or, get off my lawn type guy. When you look at the NIL investment of this team and the resources we have at our disposal to go out and construct a basketball team, and this is kind of the result. And again, it's not a lack of talent. It's not like we're just adding scrubs. It's just dysfunctional. We're adding good talent in weird spots, and we're just now in a position of more questions than answers. And I think I just fall back on the hope that maybe Woody can figure something out. So, you just got to take kind of an honest look at who we are. And I think as an IU fan, I'm going to hope that things get better because there is talent on this basketball team. And that's kind of my saving grace at this point, that Mike Woodson can figure something out with what we have.
Yeah, it's a tough thing to look at with this team. And it's a tough mirror. As Nick mentions the mirror in the chat there, they've got to see themselves and the situation that they're in. And the one side that gets me a little disappointed and a little aggravated is to hear the comments like you heard from Coach Woodson in the presser and to see the players at the end frustrated and shrugging their shoulders. I saw at least Trey and X towards the end of the game just giving a come on kind of shrug and frustration. And I want to see that turn to anger from the players to a degree of I'm not going to put up with what we're doing and how this game is going. And at least the positive side to me to a degree is that some of these games where we've had these lows, you can kind of point to at least one thing that if we turn that around, the game is very different. And this game, it's obviously the turnovers. If IU kind of controlled those turnovers and didn't do that, it would have been a very different game. It could have easily probably been a win. Again, you scratch half of those 27 points off the scoreboard, and it's a very different game, very different outlook in this game. But there are other games where IU can play far from this. Again, in the better games, in the Kansas games, in the games like that, beats an IU team like this. And I don't know, I'm rambling possibly here as well because it's equally frustrating and equally clueless and confounding. And there's going to be ups and downs to finish this season, but this team can do it. This team can hopefully find things as they get going. Xavier Johnson coming back is obviously the biggest bright spot that we have to look to in this game. And him just slowly getting up to speed is just going to mean IU improving and maybe a little bit more stability on the outside for IU. But there's going to be some more drop-offs. There's going to be more shows to have to talk about them like this. And there's going to be ones where we're going to have relief and we're going to be able to sit back and talk about the joy of IU hitting a lot more points, and this is how we should do. This is what we should repeat. And if we just do this, we'll get a lot better. And we'll see. We'll see where IU goes from here. But it's got to get better. But before I keep rambling on too much, I'm going to finish it there. Thank you for joining me here on Hoosier Morning After. Thank you to Martha for joining me as always. Special thanks to Bob Thompson for producing the music you hear on the show. If you are watching on YouTube or on Spotify, on Twitter, anywhere like that, don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, all that kind of situation. Follow me on Twitter at General Chadwick. There you can find more information about the show. Follow Martha as well at The Mop Lady. And again, as Martha alluded to, thank you to Crimson Cast for having me on. That was a lot of fun. Check them out as well on the Back Home Network if you can. Until then, that'll be it for this show. Thanks for being with us, guys. Go out there, have yourself a wonderful day, and let's go Hoosiers.